I concluded that women are better at managing their time than men in the workplace. These are knowledge workers. So that was based on 4 major findings. The first finding is that women, knowledge workers, work fewer hours than men. I mentioned that the average is about 46 hours per week. There's about 3 hours of personal time. And I count that because people are largely in office environments and they've got to be there. And so whether they eat lunch at their desk or in that lunchroom or they go out or whatever, they're at work doing that. And similarly at home, we get people to measure their personal time as well as part of your work day. So 46 hours is the total, about 3.4 hours of personal time. But if you look at men versus women, men are at 48 hours and women are only at 45 hours. So their work weeks are shorter to begin with. And why is that?
Welcome to your Wordless Podcast, the space where we redefine success, self-worth, and transformation. I am Nick Nieras, the soul-centered architect of transformation, helping you unlock your highest potential and build a legacy beyond limits. Now, whether it is self-mastery, career breakthroughs, or wealth creation, this is where change begins. Now, let's dive in. What was it like growing up as a Mark Ellwood?
Growing up, well, there are motivational speakers who say, I really had trouble and I struggled with this thing. And I've always liked people who were successful all along. But there was a moment in time where I was struggling, where I was not productive, where I was kind of on my own. I was 11. And so I was delivering newspapers. And that's where I got my grounding in productivity. So maybe people don't know about delivering newspapers, but you go to a little depot. It was in the basement of an apartment building. And these bundles of 50 papers were delivered there. And there were 6 or 7 of us. And then we'd put those newspapers in bags, carry them off and deliver them to people's houses and apartments. Okay. So I decided that's my beginning of my entrepreneurial journey. Now, on the weekends, the newspaper came with a different magazine, a colored insert. They were published separately, and you had to deliver those two together. So you take the insert and you put it inside the newspaper, and we do this at the depot. And I watched the other boys doing this, and boy, they were clunky and slow. And I thought, well, this is classic time and motion stuff, although I didn't know that term at the time. But I laid out the newspapers and the magazines and tried to figure out the fastest way to get those magazines into the newspapers. I bet I could still do it today because I didn't feel that spending all that time was wise. I needed to go out and deliver the newspapers and then get home and do my homework. And so figuring out the fastest way was important. Well, that was the beginning of my productivity journey. Then lugging around those newspapers in bags was quite heavy. So I thought, I'll invest in technology. I bought a wagon. And so the wagon I could pull along behind me made it much easier to carry those newspapers. Then there was more. You could think about pulling that wagon up one side of the street, which I did on a sidewalk, but you've got to deliver papers to the other side. So now you've got to figure out, okay, do I take 2 papers out and deliver them to 2 houses, or 3, or come back to the wagon? So constantly figuring out back and forth between the wagon and the houses was an exercise with operations research and trying to figure out the shortest routes. There's another trick. You can take the paper and you can fold it up and then throw it. Well, you can also kind of throw it without folding it. Maybe at the bottom of someone's set of steps, I could sort of toss it up into their porch. But I could do that from the sidewalk if I folded the paper up. Okay, so how much time does it take to fold a paper versus the time it saves you in throwing it? So you can make those calculations as well. Folding papers often made sense for me. There were some guys who would fold all their papers at the depot, but I thought, I'm not sure if that's the right formula. Then another thing, you had to go and collect every week. So I would Tuesday night knock on someone's door. Hi, it's Mark. I'm collecting for the paper, and they'd pay me in cash. My last route, I have 130 papers or customers. That was a lot. And so what I did there is I divided the route in half. I batched my tasks. So every 2 weeks, week number 1 and 3, I'd go to some customers. Week number 2 and 4, I'd go to the other customers. So I'm collecting for 2 weeks at a time rather than 1. that saved my collecting time. So I reduced the amount of time I spent collecting. There was one last idea. Some of the people hated the office. I mean, everybody does now. You pay electronically. Well, back then, some people did. Maybe I could have encouraged more customers to pay at the office. There's an offset there as well, because when you go and knock on people's doors, they tend to give you tips. And so your tips are higher than if you have people being at the office. There's a little bit of a trade-off there. So
Mm.
really, all of those different ideas were my thinking way back then when I was 11 about how to become more productive. So I guess that's where my journey started.
So how did that evolve throughout your journey? So did you join a company and then you also notice this productivity is costing, companies? I mean, that's actually my next question. Costing companies around the world like X amount of money because of loss in productivity due to. Hi, I'm Nick Nieras, your host of the Your Worthless podcast. Now, if these real raw stories hit home, don't wait. Please follow, like, and subscribe my Spotify and YouTube. For bite-sized inspirational reels, follow me on Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn. Don't wait. Your transformation starts today. Thank you, and bye for now.
Yeah,
Inefficiencies. So
indeed.
what was it like?
Always interested in productivity. We'd do a group project, a class project at school, and you had different elements that had to go into a binder, and you had to make 10 copies or something. So, how do you line up those elements and walk around the table and put them together? So I was always interested in that sort of thing. But at work, so before I was an entrepreneur, I was in the corporate world, and someone had meetings, and someone was always late for those meetings. In this company, it seemed to be almost part of the culture that you'd show up late. Well, I was a guy who, by this time, liked to be on time. And I thought being on time is a reflection of your integrity. And that was important to me. You do what you said you're going to do, which means showing up on time. Well, people were late. And so we were chatting as one is wont to do. And I said, well, think about how much time we're spending here waiting, and your salary and my salary and his salary, and you add all those up, and you could calculate how much time you're wasting on all this stuff. Or actually you could maybe calculate different things, or you could have a machine or a device. And so anyway, there was this kind of aha moment where I came up with the idea of the time quarter device, like a chess clock, which the time goes down towards zero. I thought, what if that time goes up and you keep adding on the time? And instead of having 2 different clocks as you have with a chess clock, what if you had dozens? And so every time every time you push a different button, it would start adding up your time on a different activity. So that was the genesis for the time quarter device. This, for those who are watching, this is the recent version of the time quarter. You simply turn it on, and then you press different buttons on it as you track your time on different activities. There's a list of activities on the back of the device. So where I like to claim is just a little less complicated to use than a doorbell. The thing with it, you press a doorbell, it's like, did a ring? Whereas the time quarter gives you audio, visual, and tactile feedback that you're tracking these activities. It's fun. It's simple. For a bunch of reasons, it's better than an app because it's actually measuring the stuff you're doing on your apps. And it's always ticking. You don't have to recharge it. And mostly our studies are anonymous. So when I ask employees to track how they spend their time, I never use their names in my reports. And that reassures them that they can be very honest with their results. They're tracking their time for about 2 weeks. So we get a remarkable 94% participation rate, which is unheard of for corporate studies and feedback and that sort of thing. But people really like using the device. So over the years, as an independent entrepreneur, so I quit that job. Actually, I think I got laid off from that job. But I was starting to develop the time quarter device. So I went out on my own and developed this business.
Especially when you're on your own, right? And when you're starting off your own business, like, how did you make sure that people know that they need this? Because if you see anybody outside, why would it make them think? How would you convince them that, hey, you need this time quarter? Hey love, it is Nick Nieras here. And if you've been feeling stuck, burnt out, or like you're meant for more, but don't know where to begin, I have got something for you. This isn't just about mindset work. It's about deep soul healing, subconscious rewiring, and remembering who you really are. Now, I created a free self hypnosis audio to help you release the noise and reconnect to your inner truth. In just 10 minutes, you will feel the shift immediately, I promise. And if you are ready to go deeper, explore my digital guides designed to help you overcome fear, activate your confidence, and find clarity in your next move. They are your next step before full transformation. But if your soul is saying, I am ready, then apply for a one to one coaching with me. This is where we do the real work, transforming your blocks, aligning your life, and unlocking the confident, magnetic version of you that creates wealth your way. Head to the show notes now. Your new chapter starts with one small yes. Now let's get back to the video you're watching.
Well, you start with the kind of a needs assessment. And so I had to pivot. And entrepreneurs talk about, changing from this direction to that direction. Turns out the time quarter was the world's most popular product that everybody thought somebody else should buy. Lawyers are billing for their time, right? And they need how they bill their time. So I don't know, I met a couple of those and presented to them. They said, hey, it's kind of simple and we need more details and we're going to track all kinds of details about what we do. You should talk to accountants. So I went to the accountants and I was on national TV. And we had these accountants use it. And after the TV program, they got back to them and they said, we used it for a couple of weeks and not quite right for us. But your market is going to be independent consultants. You should go and talk to them. And so they referred me to a couple of independent consultants. So I went to them and I went to independent consultants and they said, have you talked to the lawyers? Everybody thought someone else was going to buy it.
Right.
So a couple early on. So the market was supposed to be people who are billing for their time. And as of today, there's tons of programs out there for people billing their time. And, it's capturing the time spent and also billing and so on. So I got out of that business and I decided that my original interest, which was doing time studies, so I would use it as a diagnostic tool. And interestingly, I sold a few of the devices. I earned much more per person lending the device out and analyzing the results than I would ever by selling them. So why sell off your
Oh my gosh, yes. The data drives the decision. Yeah.
I sell it for, I don't know, $200 or $300 or something. I charge $1,000 to $1,200 per person to do one of these diagnostic studies. What I own is the devices. I own a huge database of information and I own a methodology for how to conduct these studies. So those are the things that we own, and that gives me a unique position in the marketplace.
I love that.
Challenge though, because we all run challenges, is every time I talk to a prospect, and usually they contact me, I use Google AdWords to attract people who want to do a time study. So they're already kind of interested in doing this. And every time I talk to someone, sooner or later in the conversation, the question comes up, are our employees going to be honest with that? So I kind of have to fight that all the time and reassure people that in fact employees will like it. During COVID, which I started much more before that, but during COVID, there were a whole bunch of employee tracking and monitoring systems where companies wanted to know, are people working? And so then track keystrokes or the type of program you're working on and so on. That doesn't really tell you much. Just because you're working on a Word document, is it the report you're supposed to be writing or is it the invitation to your wedding? What you're doing on Word. If you're doing keystrokes or visiting websites, is that a legitimate website where you're doing some research or is it not? People didn't like those tracking systems because they were anonymous. And what companies said or what critics said was, we really don't care about how much time they spend. It's about their results. And I would concur. We want people to be delivering results. However, time as a diagnostic tool can be very powerful. If you want to run a 100-meter race, the result, what counts? Are you running in 12 seconds or 11 seconds or 10 seconds? That's really all that counts. Well, not really. You want to understand what's your heart rate? What's your oxygen intake? How many paces per second are you taking? What's your stride? What's your gait looking like? So at the highest level, those sort of diagnostic analyses help you in achieving what you want to do, which is running faster. So similarly, we care about people's results, sure, but time as a diagnostic tool says, well, are you getting burdened by administrative tasks?
Yes.
Are you spending your time on your top priority activities? So I don't suggest people do it all the time, but as a brief diagnostic tool, it can really be a powerful tool. And so I have to fight that a little bit. And one last thought.
Yes, yes, please.
Things that's occurred to me right in recent times is that companies really don't care, but they should. So the thing is, they get free labor. So if you look at my database, the average amount of time that people spend working is about 46 hours per week. Now, there's a small element of personal time in there, breaks and so on. But if people are supposed to work, well, it's often 37 and a half hours, companies are getting free labor. So if people are working 50 hours, they're getting tons of free labor. So the company says, well, if this person wants to get promoted, who wants to do a good job and so on, is prepared to work extra hours, well, we don't care. And so that's why productivity is not a high priority for them. Having said that, within those 45 or 50 hours or however long people are working, there's all kinds of non-value added time. So companies could care to be able to reduce that. Second, when they're working those long, crazy hours, they get burnout, or they get stressed, or some of that's unproductive. So it does make sense to analyze those hours. So companies think that they're getting free labor, but that comes at a cost, and it's inefficient free labor. So that's why you should do a diagnostic study to understand where all the time is going.
I wish I would have spoken to you last year, because I think 2 years back, so I was tasked to do a productivity test or tracker for a BPO. And I did all of the dashboard, but it was very manual driven. So now that you said it, and there are all these data points, right? Data points are super important. What are your KPIs and whatnot? And every time I churn out those KPIs, I've got, I will be asked by obviously they should, by my higher management, see, how'd you get this data? Are this true? Like, what are the nuances when compared to you doing this on a Monday, or you taking this test on a monitoring task on a Friday when people are more in their mood to, go to the weekend. So I guess the question that I want to ask here, I know it is proprietary to you. What are some of the data points that you actually collect for?
I presented a paper recently about this. So we're tracking how people spend their time, the frequency of activities, how many times they do them, and so we can calculate a typical duration. So I recently thought, well, I'm interested in men versus women. I go to youth conferences, and what we know is that women domestically spend more time on domestic tasks. That's childcare, shopping, and cleaning. And so in Western countries, that tends to be the case, that women are more responsible for those tasks than men. And that's quite common. So I thought, well, what about the workplace? I've got a lot of data about the workplace. And at these conferences, they look just work as just one big activity. But I've measured 3,000 different work activities. So I thought I can get really granular.
Wow, 3,000. Okay,
so
that's a lot.
Yeah, a lot of them are very similar, but there's about 500 that are distinctly different. There's sort of variations on those. But anyway, so I thought, okay, let's look at men versus women. So I started by dividing my database in two. I put all the Jims and Harolds and Marks in one database. I put all the Susans and Marys in another. I split people. And so I had all the men in one and all the women in the other. Because that's the only sort of demographic data that I've got from clients. Sometimes I don't even get the names at all. We did a project with PwC for the Ontario government, and we didn't even have the names of people. So that data wasn't able to use. But about 80% of my database, there's a name associated with it, because we've got to send the device to somebody, or which job they're in. But again, I never report on those names. I know them, but I don't report them back in my. So anyway, I ended that up. And so I started looking at what are the patterns. Eventually, I concluded that women are better at managing their time than men in the workplace. These are knowledge workers. So that was based on 4 major findings. The first finding is that women, knowledge workers, work fewer hours than men. I mentioned that the average is about 46 hours per week. There's about 3 hours of personal time. And I count that because people are largely in office environments and they've got to be there. And so whether they eat lunch at their desk or in the lunchroom or they go out or whatever, they're at work doing that. And similarly at home, we get people to measure their personal time as well as part of your work day. So 46 hours is the total, about 3.4 hours of personal time. But if you look at men versus women, men are at 48 hours and women are only at 45 hours. So their work weeks are shorter to begin with. And why is that? Well, all those domestic tasks, guess who's got to go home and pick up a child from daycare, and so on. So that was the first finding, but the other ones are more profound. I'll just, if you don't mind, in the time management literature, talk about spending your time on important tasks. Well, what are important tasks? It's never really defined. And so there's something called the Eisenhower matrix, attributed a little bit to former President Dwight Eisenhower, but he in turn attributed it to someone at a university, a president of a university, who had come up with this idea of thinking about urgent versus important. It's since been adopted in the time management literature, but not really well defined. So in those four quadrants of urgent, important, not important. So the one that people say you should work on is your important but not urgent tasks. Don't do all the urgent stuff. Work on important stuff that's not too urgent. That's so-called quadrant number 2. Well, all right, what are those tasks? I thought I can define those for the first time ever. So when we do our time studies in advance, I ask people some questions. And one of them is, what are the most important things you need to do in your job? Because I want to match, is what they say they're supposed to be doing, does that match up with the time that they're spending? And so to a sales rep, they'll say, I need to process orders or handle complaints or provide service. On top of all of those, the biggest thing that they need to do, the most common, is selling. So that's for a sales rep. You ask a manager what they're supposed to be doing and so on. So I took 13 major jobs and asked and looked at what people had been telling me. And then I was say, well, that's what your major activity is supposed to be. Are you spending your time on that? So then I went matched by job. How are they spending their time across my entire database of hundreds of different types of jobs and thousands of employees. So what I found is that the time spent on those highest priority tasks across all kinds of knowledge worker jobs as people working in offices tends to be about 20%. Now that sounds like that 20-80 rule, but that's something different. And it just happens to be that number. So you should be spending, people are spending 20% of their time on their highest priority tasks. Women are at 22%. Men are only at 18%. So now high performers are up in the 30% range. The average across everybody, 22 versus 18. So women are able to work fewer hours and spend more time on their highest priority tasks than men. There were 2 other findings as well that supported this, but we can talk about that.
Yeah, I'd love that. So, wow. So your findings are saying that women are better at, I don't want to sound biased here.
And based on those 4 criteria, the other 2 were frequency. They get things done faster. And there was a 4th.
And consistently women fare better than men in all those findings,
The third one, they're doing things shorter. The duration of their activities is faster. And finally, when you compare them to their ideal profiles where they would want to be, they're closer to their ideal profiles as well. So based on those criteria, women are managing their time than men. So then you can say, well, what about the results? So I don't always have results because clients don't always provide that. But there's other evidence in time management research, and some of mine as well, that time spent on those top priority activities does lead to higher results. So you would suggest that women are probably getting better results than men, and that more sales made, better managing of employees, and so on.
Wow, the data speaks for itself. And now the question comes in as to, are women properly compensated based on the result? But that's a whole new topic about compensation versus men and women. But I am very interested to know about all these things because I used to be in the corporate world as well. So productivity is something that we know it all impacts the bottom line, but only the higher management, and especially when you are the decision maker, and then you can enact those changes or implement, let's say, because you come in and then you tell us, say I have a company, you tell us, okay, Nick, this is where you're lacking, where you want to go, and this is the gap, right? And you will be coming in and say, okay, what should I do then to drive the needle forward? So, and then you mentioned results are not always shared back to you. You come in and do the analysis, but I'm sure over the course of your work with these companies or independent companies, how are they turning their operations around based on the numbers that you've provided them at the
What's
end of
interesting, a moment ago, you said where you want to go. And so you think, okay, what does that look like? Well, early on, I didn't have much data. And when you look at data, you should always compare it to something. If you say, 55% of people believe in this, or 40% of people support this political party, or whatever, those numbers sit there kind of on their own. And so when you look at data in the public sphere, you really ought to look at comparisons or trends. 55% of people support this thing. What was it 2 years ago? Well, it was only 30%. Okay, so more people are supporting it. Or how does that compare to, a different company or a different country or something like that? In this country, this thing is really popular, but in that country, it's not. So we always look for comparisons. And so I urge people, 80% of people support this. Well, is that a lot? What about the other 20% of people, or 30, whatever? People throw out these numbers. How does that compare? So we need to make those comparisons. And early on, I didn't have any data. So what was I going to compare to? So I asked people, and have been doing ever since, to give me what their ideal profile looks like, because you said where they want to go. So if your ideal profile says, I should be spending 30% of my time on selling, and I'm only at 20%, then there's a gap there. And so how do you close that gap? Or since then, if every other company is at 25%, I can say, not only are you short versus your gap, but you're short versus other companies that I've got lots of information in my database. So that's where I'm able to say that you should be able to improve your productivity, or what I've seen, by an hour per person per day. So my definition is productivity. Are you spending your time on your highest priority tasks? That 20%. That's the average, but the top performers get up to 30% or more. And you think, only 30%? Well, yeah, because as a sales rep, you want to be selling, but you also have to go to internal meetings. You also have to do order processing. You also have to do that customer service work. You also have to travel and so on. So that's why those numbers don't add up to 80%. It's only 20 or so percent. And so you got to turn that 20 into 25 or 30. And some people are able to do that. So how do they do that? Well, most sort of the common theme that I've been talking to organizations about is the non-value added work. What are the things that get in the way of your productivity? That's paperwork and internal meetings and reports and so on and so forth. And so if you reduce those, then you can allow people to be more productive. So you said, you asked, what are people doing? So you can automate some of that. You can delegate it. You can outsource it. You can eliminate it. And so successful companies are using those techniques to reduce admin time. However, there's a catch. One of those techniques is to use technology. And so let me just talk about technology for a moment. I started doing these in 1990. A lot of companies didn't even have
1990?
Yeah.
Wow.
A lot of companies,
I was just born then.
companies didn't even have voicemail yet.
Hmm.
It was a thing in the distant future, as was the internet, as was smartphones and so on. Lots of people had laptops. But here's the thing. We keep promising people, get this new technology and it will make your life more productive. Well, my example from way back when I worked at Procter & Gamble, we used to do spreadsheets. Well, we didn't call them that at the time, but we had a number of areas of the country across the top. And we had a number of months of the year down the side. And so in January, in this region, we're going to have this promotion. In February, in that region, we're going to have this promotion. Guess what? That looks like a spreadsheet. Well, we calculated all the money we were going to spend or planned to spend in those different regions. And we added it all up. And what was the spreadsheet? but we did it by hand. So, man, I'm off by, $1,000. You had to recalculate, figure out where your mistake was. So somebody introduced us to Lotus, which was the original spreadsheet before Excel. And she didn't do a very good job of explaining it. It was an hour and a half and was bored. And really later I realized she should have said, here's how to use it. Well, so we started using it. But here's what happened. Instead of looking at a single promotion plan, our bosses said, can you show that with 2% growth, 5% growth, and 10% growth?
I love that. I love simulation.
So now we got 3 different promotion plans, and each of them takes a while to calculate, even with a spreadsheet. And so I always used to joke. I said, I don't know if our promotion plans are if they're any better, but they certainly have better looking fonts. So that's what happened is technology just allowed us more options and more different things. Let's get to email. Whoa, what a great thing. I can communicate with somebody across the planet or, down the street or wherever. Well, but email led to more and more emails. So I've measured time spent on unnecessary email, not in every study, but sometimes. And so the employees themselves who used email on different activities, but one activity just for unnecessary stuff. Turns out it's 3.4 hours per week. Well, that's a huge amount of time. So email, which was this wonderful technology that was going to make us all more productive, did. But it came with these unexpected spin-offs and side effects, 3.4 hours per week of unnecessary email. So every technology that comes along brings advantages, but brings some disadvantages as well. Back in the early 90s, a big technology company put out a video and it showed people using, I guess, the equivalent of smartphones and scheduling appointments on their computer and driving around and so on. And it was really very slick and glossy and talked about this wonderful world of the future. Well, that future has arrived and people are getting spam and they're getting bogged down with all these emails and so on.
Yes.
So when somebody said to me, look at AI, which is the next big technology of the future, and how it's going to change our lives, I think, well, yes, it's going to help in many ways, but it's going to have some of those unexpected side effects and spin-offs as well. I get LinkedIn queries now from people who are not real, and I got to deal with those. And I could go on, but there's some bad players out there in the AI world, and there's some mistakes, and there's all kinds of things. So here's what I know. If back when I started, people were spending 25% of their time, roughly managers, on administrative tasks, and they do today, 10 years from now, to the extent that people are continuing to do knowledge work jobs, and some of those jobs will get eliminated or automated. But to the extent that people are doing knowledge work jobs, my prediction is they will still be spending 25% of their time on administrative, non-value added tasks, and they will still have that opportunity to improve their productivity with the next technology or whatever that comes along.
Wow. That was so powerful because just when we thought that AI is going to solve most or at least half of the problems that we have, especially, automating certain things, you come in and say they're going to add more work to the person doing it because, just because a simple analogy would be to producing this podcast, right? So fine. It's a one person show for me. So I'm the one doing scheduling. I'm the one doing the meetings and the interviewing itself and the post-production. Yes, there are AI tools helping me in the background, but still I get bogged down on that because I need to complete that first. But at the cost of now the trade-off is I need resources. I can eliminate those things off of my hands, but that means I need to hire people to help do it for me. The thing about that is, yes, it's a catch-22. Now, I'm also very well aware or try to be mindful that, we have all these AI tools, ChatGPT, it's good and whatnot, but I cannot help but to think how do you stay relevant?
Well, here's another quick story about technology. American comedian Bill Maher talked about going to a restaurant and valet people parking his car. He used to say, oh, here's my little ticket for the car, pick up my keys, whatever. And now he goes to the restaurant and he's got to download the app and create an account and put in a password for this car.
You're right.
Thing. We had that at the scale. I work as a part-time ski instructor, and it's a wonderful job, and the ski hill does terrific stuff. But recently, we had a special course set up, and we wanted parents to give us a little waiver for this special course. So in the past, you say, here's a sheet, read this, don't hold you responsible, and sign it, and there we go, and get a bunch of papers. But no, we wanted them to go on the app. So they had to sign in and find the thing and this and that, so on. So here we are out in the cold. These parents are standing around with their phones and struggling with their phones just to sign this little app. Now, the data is stored electronically. We can find out when people did it and where they were and who and so on. But boy, oh boy, it just slowed them down. So technology is nice in terms of some of those benefits, but you really need it for picking up your car from the valet parking, or do you really need it to sign a waiver? And, companies say, oh, now you can use our technology. It comes with those spin-offs. Just because it's easy for you to use as a new user is complicated. The timecorder, I actually don't send out instructions on how to use it. We get people in a little orientation session. It takes about 5 seconds to learn to use the timecorder device. And that's the high amount of time. Turn it on, press one button, and it's working for you. So if you keep technology simple and unobtrusive, then that's why people like using it. And so early on, that was important for me to keep it seamless and easy to use. There's a way of making manual adjustments in case you forget to turn something on, but even that's dead simple to use. So keep away all those extra features and keep technology simple rather than complicating our lives.
Wow. Well, thank you. I've definitely learned so much from you today. So what are you working on currently? What's exciting for you?
I'm actually sponsoring a study of senior executive women. So there's no charge for them to participate. So if you're a woman and you're managing a bunch of people, then you're welcome to use one of our devices. North America only, because it costs a lot to ship them all over the place. So I'm hoping to look at that now. You could say, well, you already study women, but I'm gathering more demographic information from them about life satisfaction, about whether they're a parent of young children and so on. So there's a whole bunch of demographic items that I can do some cross tabs and find out. So I'm sponsoring that study and continuing to work on corporate studies. I just did one for a number of store managers at retail gas stations. How do they spend their time? Is it with customers? Is it managing staff? Is it working on the floor on merchandising and so on? So I'm going to do a paper on those to add those up and see where they're spending their time. I also do some corporate facilitation work in terms of strategic planning. So the time studies is gathering data. I help organizations with determining what their future directions are as well. So doing some of those kind of projects, keeping my plate full of different activities.
I love that. Okay. So after all of this, Mark, what is next for you?
Next is just continuing to inspire the world. People are struggling with time management, and I'll just leave you with one tip. I got all this stuff coming at me, and I tell people, well, write down what you're going to do. Use a to-do list. The to-do list is great because it deals with the past, the present, the future. In the present, you're saying, okay, well, what do I need to do right now? The future is how you plan your time. And the past is about, okay, at the end of the day, I checked some things off. We'll often come home from work and think, well, what did I get done today? Well, you can check off things from your to-do list. But here's my unique take on the to-do list, which no one else talks about. I suggest people start with a blank slate, nothing on your to-do list at all. And then ask yourself, based on the goals, things that I want to achieve, what are the most important things I need to do today to affect my results a month from now? Those are your top priority activities. Let me just repeat that. Start with a blank slate and ask yourself, if I had nothing else to do today, what would I do to affect my results a month from now? Write those down and spend at least 20% of your time on those, hopefully 30 or more percent. Those are your top priority activities. Do those or plan for those first, then write on all the other things on your to-do list, meetings, emails to respond to, and so forth. So I'm out trying to inspire the world to be better at planning their time, take control of their time rather than letting it control them.
And you can also apply that to your life, to your physical health, whether you want to be lean.
Absolutely. I will spend half an hour at the gym or an hour, whatever the number is, So if you're clear about your long-term goals, that starts to impact how you think about spending your time today. And if there's a gap, oh gosh, I'm not spending enough time with my family, understand what are the things getting in the way, try and eliminate those or delegate or automate or something so that you're reducing that non-value added time and spending more on the things that are most important to you.
I love that. Wow. Thank you so much, Mark. You really gave me some important nuggets that I can carry with me and also to my listeners for times to come. So, Mark, we're going to pivot to a self-worth question because my podcast talks about self-worth, self-esteem. So my question to you, Mark, in your opinion, how do you define self-worth? And how does that impact your personal view of yourself and happiness?
But you've got a lot of different answers to that. Self-worth really is about what's important to you in your life. Family, it's job, it's fitness, it's friends. And so you kind of sit down with a pad and write some of those things down. And my particular take on that is, are you spending your time on those things that are important to you? And your self-worth gets damaged when, oh gosh, I'm not spending time on myself or my family or whatever. One thing from the time study we learned is that mothers feel very guilty about their self-worth. I'm feeling guilty because I'm not spending enough time with my kids or something like that. And what we found for them, based on some research that I did, is mothers who spend time on themselves actually feel less rushed, feel a greater sense of life satisfaction. So they don't have to feel guilty. So they were doing things like reading, fitness, spiritual time, gardening, even cooking for themselves. Things that are important to you, spend time on those. You think, oh, I got to work on all this other stuff. No, spend time on you first, and that makes you a better person for all those other things. So that's where it starts.
Okay, what is your heart's greatest wish?
My heart's greatest wish is that the world becomes a better place, and that's people doing what's important to them. But a new idea is that there's a little more kindness out there as well. A year ago, I decided to eliminate some words from my vocabulary, offended or ridiculous or outrageous. I just thought, we don't need those words. So if people can do things that are important and be kind to each other, I think that's a recipe for making the world a better place.
So how can people reach out to you?
So I've got a couple of different websites. One of them is getmoredone.com. And so Mark at getmoredone.com. But if you just remember getmoredone.com, there's research papers there. There's the time quarter. There's all kinds of things that people can reach me via that. Keep it simple.
Awesome.
I don't give people 10 different ways, just one way to get in touch with
Get
you.
it done. Get more done in the sense. Okay. So Mark, before we close off the interview, any last message you want to give to our listeners listening in?
I just want people to recognize that your time is worth it and that you can take control of your time rather than letting it take control of you. So do the things that are important to you. Put those first. Analyze how you spend your time with a time quarter or do it on your own with a spreadsheet or something. But just try and understand that and recognize your time is worth it.
And time is something you can never get back. So all right. Well, that is a wrap for today's episode with Mark Ellwood. Thank you, Mark, for your time and for your wisdom and for continuing to uplift others with your work. For our listeners, this has been Your Worthless. Read that again, the juxtaposition of your very soul. Remember, if you've ever felt worthless, you are not alone. Your soul chose to be here to matter. And for that reason alone, you are worthy. A huge thank you again to you, Mark, and to all of you for listening. Until then, I am Nick Nieras. Keep shining, keep growing, and always remember you are worthy and you are enough. See you in the next episode. Thank you, Mark, for your time. Hi, Mark. How are you? How are you
I'm
today?
terrific.
Good morning to you.
Lovely to be here.
Thank you so much for saying yes to be interviewed today. Now, I'd like to introduce myself formally to you and to all of our listeners. My name is Nicolette. I am the creator for the podcast titled You're Worthless. Read that again, the juxtaposition of your very soul. Now, today we're going to talk about how to use time effectively. But first, let me introduce you to all of our listeners today, and then we can get right into our conversation. So, hello everyone. We have Mark Ellwood here with us. Mark is an internationally known productivity consultant. He inspires people to spend more time on what matters most. Now, employees participate in his unique user-friendly time studies with his proprietary time hoarder devices. Mark then shows organizations how employees can increase time spent on what are the most urgent tasks and top of the priority activities by an hour per person per day. So Mark's mission is to give organizations and their employees the guidance they need to get more done. Now, last year I got out of the corporate world. Now joining the entrepreneurship journey, it's an easy feat, and it seems like you've been doing this for a long time, Mark. And I think there's so much I can learn from it. I would like to learn from you. But first off, can you please share with us what was it like growing up as a Mark Ellwood? Love this episode? Now, transformation doesn't end here. Head on to @holistic.lifestyle_with_Nick. That is on my Instagram. Or head on to my website, www.deniqueirasw.holisticlifestyle.com for more info on my coaching framework, which is the Worthy, Authentic, and Abundant Framework, digital guides, and my upcoming events such as retreats and master classes and workshops. Now, I also do intuitive readings where we get to check on your soul path. And if you're also wanting to check on